Good morning. It is Monday, October 31st, 2022, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Okay, since we last talked, the Fed digested another serving of inflationary data. Mortgage rates moved to the highest level in 20 years. Russia has attempted to end the Ukrainian grain export deal. Election polls continue to suggest a big night for the GOP in the House next week. In one of the strangest stories, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was attacked in their home in San Francisco. The Cyclones still have not won a Big 12 football game. The World Series started and is tied 1-1. And Election Day 2022 is just 8 days away. Happy Halloween, Jim Wiesemeyer. How are you? Pro Farmer Policy Analyst.
I'm ready for the Halloweeners, and I get more than a few because I've got a younger community by me. I do want to give a shout out to the Renderers Association because I was in California late last week, and they had a very good meeting, and it was an international flavor too, Chip. And a number of international people came up to me, one that lives in the U.S. now from South Africa, and said what I typically get from international people: what is going on in our country?
Yeah. Okay. I'll bite. What did you tell him?
We're nuts right now. We're going through this era of nuts because several of them left their country for the freedom here, and they cannot understand why we're doing it ourselves. That's the question. And I don't have an answer to that.
Sometimes it takes some outside perspective to make you realize what's going on around you. And I hear the same thing from some of my friends in lands afar. So yeah. Have you got any Halloween parties planned? Are you going to a costume party?
No, I'm away from. Oh no, I don't do that for years now. No, I just stay at home and watch sports and read and open the door. And my cat, the first female cat I ever had, sits right at the door and looks at them. And of course, they pet her. She just is unbelievable.
Is it almost like she's passing judgment, like cats do?
Yes, especially her.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Melody has chimed in already here. She is saying good morning, Melody. There's a comments tab on your page. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, we will be sure to work it into it. But here we go. We're going to kick right off with something from Melody. Muddy Mississippi proves she's still relevant. Train strike whispers still persistent. Transportation sector needs repair. This is something that we could say for the week ahead, but it's also from the week behind. It's from this weekend. It's from everything, Jim.
Yeah.
The transportation issues in this country are just overwhelming.
Yes, I want to. In this case, I want to give all that money taxpayers put into the infrastructure bill time, because these are not shovel-ready projects like Obama wanted, and so it was needed. And I'm going to see how they unfold, but it's going to take some time. Now, my sister in St. Louis tells me they're going to get several days of rainfall. I don't. Hopefully, that's the case where we can get some water down that Mississippi again.
Yeah, the pattern was expected to favor rainfall in the upper Midwest, which would be a godsend for the Mississippi River. But it's been very disappointing to this point. We had a week ago today, we had 9/10 of an inch here in Northeast Iowa, and that helped take some of the edge off of the drought stress that we were feeling. And I know that there are people in Colorado, Western Kansas, Nebraska that are going to say drought stress. You guys don't know anything about drought. I get that. But we were feeling it for where we're at. It's all relevant. But the pattern has been very disappointing so far, that we just haven't been getting the rainfall in the upper Midwest, Jim. So it's something that we're going to have to continue to watch. And
yes, and it shows you the importance again of the mighty Mississippi to agriculture.
Right.
Just a key lifeline.
Absolutely. Okay. I want to try to stick to some the questions that are coming in. We're going to get to them. That's
Yes.
it's all part of what we want to talk about today. I want to go to last week on something because there is something that it's this Mexico's plans to go forward with a ban of imports of U.S. GMO, well, of GMO corn from anywhere, Jim. This is something that just seems so misguided and so detrimental to the Mexican people and so non-scientific that it just blows me away that that it's something that we're even talking about.
Well, it has the political overtones within Mexico, and I think that's coming from the top, Chip. So, that's why this is important. Now, Secretary Vilsack of USDA said late last week that he doesn't agree with the somber analysis of this, but I wish he'd come out and detail why. He is more upbeat, but he still said recently it'll take until 2024 to settle this issue.
Yeah, I just feel like it's going to be one that we're going to have to end sooner rather than later, or it's going to have an impact on longer term plans for producers here in the U.S. On Friday on the free for all, Tyson Redpath from the Russell Group was talking about Mexican corn importers that are already looking into deals with individual U.S. producers to identity preserve a crop and send non-GMO corn into Mexico at some point.
Yeah. And some trade sources tell me they're about 85% there on Mexico working deals. Now, I haven't seen any proof of that, but I'm telling you this because it affects the seed varieties,
right,
etc. All that stuff, as you said.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to start getting ready for a different mix of corn hybrids in 2024, we're already 3 years late.
Yeah,
in doing that.
agree.
Scary. The diesel situation we talked about it a lot last week. It took a lot of headlines, but Jim, it was bad last week, and it feels like it's worse this week.
Worse, and you had a major fuel company that I wrote about in Pro Farmer this morning, the highest alert that they can give, and we've seen what with a 25 now it's probably under a 25-day supply. So, and while gasoline prices are coming down, diesel prices are not. You're well above the 525 area.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you do? Just at the gut slot of harvest and other aspects, and of course the heating oil.
Yeah. This has implications for the Northeast heating oil. This is something that we talked about on Friday as well on the free for all. Why aren't we? Why are they still using heating oil in the Northeast? I've got a friend on Long Island, and he sent me a picture, and I sent him over to Jim a picture of his fuel oil barrels sitting outside, 550 gallons of capacity. He said, unfortunately, he's down to about 1/3 full in those barrels right now. He pointed out it's not just the furnaces; it's the infrastructure to run the natural gas to those houses. The infrastructure isn't there to do it. Jim countered very quickly with that's what the infrastructure bill is all about. Okay, if that is true, why aren't they doing it?
This is what, yeah, I think that was a big omission. And how many years have we known this? Yeah, I did some history, and in the Northeast, with 82% of households using oil, Chip, as their primary energy source, that equates to about 5.5 million residents. So, and then the commercial, 35% of commercial fuel oil use is also in the Northeast. So this has been known. So again, it's the fault of both Democrat and Republican administrations to strategize and look ahead and help solve problems, but in this case they didn't. I know the history of why they used oil in the 1800s. Homes in the Northeast were wood or coal heated, and then this came along because oil was plentiful and much cheaper. So I understand why they went that way.
Yep. and to understand why we are not going to natural gas is because the infrastructure dollars are not destined to be spent on running natural gas lines through existing communities, because solar and wind is supposed to take over, Jim.
Yeah, well, tell that to the Northeast people when they're, get their bills. So
Okay, I'll
again,
tell them. I'll tell them it's all part of a transition. Not to worry. Don't worry. It's all part of a transition.
transitions are rough, is what the administration says. That doesn't pay the bills.
Doesn't keep you warm either.
No, it doesn't keep you warm. Absolutely. So
So
failed policy, just failed policy over the years.
yeah, it is a scary situation, and this diesel, as we were saying, the it's literally one of those things that when I think about it, it makes me sweat about what it means for this country, Jim. It
Yeah.
does.
And there's not much even a White House can do on this one
Right.
because the strategic reserves are very minimal. So,
Yeah. Over the weekend, this is such a scary story, and you know what? I think it actually happened late last week, so we'll transition here with this. But Paul Pelosi, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, was attacked in their home in San Francisco. Weird
yeah.
story, Jim.
Yeah,
What?
not all the details are out, so I hesitate. But 2:30 in the morning, thank goodness that he alerted the police in a coded message, as I understand it. But from a Washington perspective, Chip, this just is another signal of political violence. Now, because he asked, "Where's Nancy?" When he came in, but there's all sorts of other rumors or unsubstantiated news on this one, but it's just not a good development. And I think
No.
it's a mental case situation again.
Again, yeah. Gary made the comment here. We thought a few months back Roe versus Wade was October surprise. I think media trying to cover up, suppress any facts about Paul Pelosi is it now.
Yeah.
And it's because of what you were. That comment is there because of what you were just said. There's all kinds of stories out there about how this happened, why it happened.
Yeah.
Uh, Boy, this is one. Let's wait for the police
Yes.
reports, right?
I agree. I'm not. I'm just commenting that he got his skull fractured, not the brain, and he
Right.
had to have surgeries and that. So it's just not a good development all the way around. And
Absolutely not.
if the reasons why it was easy, some Democrats easily pointed to Trump, and that's silly. And I mean, remember when the Democrats, when Trump was president, said to holler and get at people where they were eating, whatever. This fostered a lot of stuff too. Not the total blame, but we have to get back to civility in this country, period.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you said it earlier. You were talking with some new foreign friends over the weekend. They had to have heard this story and just wondered to themselves, what in the world is going on?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you're going to see a lot of money thrown at some leadership people in Congress for protection now. That's an easy conclusion, Chip.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And Gary makes another quick comment here, very, very quickly. Why no security at the home?
I agree.
Yeah. It's crazy. Crazy. Okay. Lula back again in Brazil. Is it the third term that
Third term,
President Lula?
unprecedented, I
Yeah.
believe, and not too long after he was in jail. So here we go
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Uh,
What
he
does it mean?
Well, what's it mean is the Democrats are happy because he's going to quit, doing the deforestation moves. That was the initial conclusion that I got, Chip, and he's not in office until January 1. But he's popular, but it was a very close vote, within a percentage point or so. So. And the his opposition has still not declared loss, so we'll have to see.
Okay. You know what? I want to go back to the energy comments and conversation just real quickly before we move on, Jim, because there's a good question here. Well, they're all good questions. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Uh, but Deanne has a question. What will it take to shift our energy to building the bench of new public servants that lead with civility? I'm sorry, that's not so much an energy question. That's more of a just a public servant question. You know, Deanne brings up a good point, and it's something that has been on my mind quite a bit. We look at some of the races, and we think to ourselves, "I can't believe that guy is leading," or "I can't believe that that guy is even in the race." Well, why didn't the other party put up a better candidate against him? I mean, you look up in Pennsylvania, and I'm not saying that Dr. Oz, or oh shoot, the
Arizona
lieutenant governor.
Masters, the football player Walker in
Oh yeah,
Georgia.
yeah. The race in Georgia, the race in Pennsylvania, the race in Arizona, all of those are great examples of kind of a poor candidate on both sides.
Yes. And,
Fetterman. Thank you, Deanne. It's Fetterman. It's
Adam is
Fetterman
saying
versus Oz. How is that a tight race? It's a
that,
tight race because
yeah.
the Republicans didn't put up a good enough candidate.
Yes. And here's another reason on future elections. I remember at a Pro Farmer meeting more than a few years ago, Clayton Yider, who's now no longer with us, was one of the smartest people I ever knew that came into government. From Nebraska, and we asked him this question about civility then, and he told us until the opposition party, the minority party, whether they are Democrats or Republicans, until they're a true minority. In other words, you can't come back into power the next election. You won't see much give from either political party. And I think that is the best explanation I can have. And Adam points out the geriatric politicians have got to go. I'm of the spirit that I think we do need a turnover, because some of the younger people I see coming in, not all, but some are really good, And I think the American public should see more of that. I see it at the commodity group level and in the lobbyist, Chip. SEPA meeting, put on by Combicel, has some of the best representatives sit on a panel, 10 to 11, where they go through by commodity, and most of them are young people, and it gives me great faith that at least in the ag sector, we have a good farm club building up, whether they're the heads of the groups now or the lobbyist. And somebody like, I'll just give a shout out, Amanda Bilek. She's from the Minnesota Corn Growers. I mean, she handles the Minnesota legislature better than anybody I've seen. And so that gives me faith that we'll eventually get there.
Okay. Jim, you won't believe this, but we are already 19 minutes in. We've got two major issues that we need to cover. The first one of these issues has corn, call it 10 to 14 cents higher, soybeans modestly higher, and it's got wheat sharply higher today. We'll call it 35 to 45 cents higher. And that is, Russia has said that it is going to indefinitely suspend its participation in the UN brokered grain deal to allow shipments of Ukrainian grain out of the Black Sea. This is as the conflict was as intense over the weekend as we've seen it in quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's escalating. And, several things here. Putin knows that it has already been a protracted war, and it's going to be more protracted. That he sees a partial weakening of support from both Europe and certain sectors in the United States. You recall how we weakened on Vietnam, Afghanistan, even Russia with their incursion into Afghanistan. That's point one. Point two is, I don't think Putin wanted to, sign on to this agreement to begin with, and now that those missiles, he has an excuse to indefinitely suspend, maybe not resurrect it, because now he can send a record or near record crops in Russia to those needy nations, and he won't be accused of starving the world.
Yeah, I think this is all about timing. I really do, because they do have the new crop that they could ship and ship more aggressively out of
Yes,
Ukraine.
yes,
So you slow that down a little bit. And plus, think about what the next 4 months mean to Europe as far as the fuel, the fertilizer, food supplies. We are just entering the time period in which Russia will likely gain the most leverage over Europe.
yes.
Correct?
Yes, and food inflation is going to be with us for a while, point blank. I mean, not only from the fertilizer perspective, but from the food availability perspective.
Yeah. Do you think that President Putin could gain enough leverage over Europe uh, to get Europe to bend a bit on its support for Ukraine?
History would suggest that. I hope I'm wrong, Chip, but history would suggest that. And if you see the U.S. also pushing for a settlement between Ukraine and Russia, that's a sign of that's what Putin wants. Okay.
Yep.
The hardest question I'm getting in my speeches now that I simply cannot answer, and I'm researching it: what will it take to end this war? You know.
Wow.
So how do you work a compromise with the person singular who invaded you? That's
Yeah.
hard for Ukraine, and I don't blame them.
Right. Right. Another kind of strange. Is that enough on Ukraine and the grain
I
deal?
think so.
Okay.
Bottom line, you just because Brian Grady, a pro farmer, said a few months ago that the wheat market is mostly dependent on headlines or
Yeah.
actions out of Ukraine and Russia, and he was exactly right. We're seeing it today.
Yeah. Yeah, and he will also remind us that this is a bigger story for corn than it is for wheat, but wheat
Yes,
doesn't have anything else to trade on, so it will react more aggressively to any headlines out of Ukraine
agree,
than what the corn market will.
agree.
So, uh, the video, Jim, of people fleeing that iPhone factory in China, weird.
This is important, Chip, because of two things. Because of Xi's leadership or the lack thereof. So he's going to be pressured more. And two, China's economy. We saw more numbers come out of China today of a weakening manufacturing sector. And the world needs China. They're number two economy. So this does not smack well for the world economy, where you really need a GDP, gross domestic product, of 4.5% or higher for a comfortable, demand-driven world market, and we're well beyond that. So it's important.
Okay. Let's sprint forward here. I'm just going to mention this. We don't have to talk about it, but Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady, who you just mentioned, has sent the warning last week that this afternoon's first update of the winter wheat crop condition uh, could be the lowest on record, the poorest on record, however you want to say it. So it's something that we're going to have to be watching.
Dust it in and sweep the bins, right?
Yeah, I think so. Tomorrow, the FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee meeting starts. What are we watching?
Well, the wide expectation is for a 75 basis point cut, but the true focus will be on what the Fed either says in their statement or in Jerome J. Powell's, the Fed chairman's presser regarding December and future rate hikes. The consensus now is building for maybe a 50 basis point hike in December, with 25 basis point hikes, a couple of them in the new year. That would put us at or around 5%, Chip, and that would equal 3% inflation, and that's by the end of the year. So I think that once we get that, but that's certainly, you don't call it a pivot when you're still raising rates. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what the consensus is telling me.
Yep. Okay. Let's go on to the elections, shall we?
Yes.
It's a final stretch, and the Democrats They brought out the big gun this weekend. Obama is making the rounds.
Yes, in the in some of the blue states that he's attending, and that tells you a lot right there. And it also tells you that Biden did not go anywhere. He stayed up in Delaware over the weekend. That says a lot right there, Chip. You've got Trump now going into, I think, 4 key states, and that can be a positive and a negative depending on your feelings, Chip. Bottom line, an increasing number of election prognosticators are upping their top end for net Republican gains in the House, 20 to 25 seats net. And the 25 seat is important, Chip, because that would give likely House Speaker Kevin McCarthy from California a little more leeway relative to his arch conservative members. In the Senate, it's razor thin polls. It can either be, I think, 50-50 or plus 1 or 2, maybe even 3 on the Republican side, because the independents are beginning to show that they're favoring now the Republican Party, and that happens in midterm election and many elections. That one side is favored over the other. That's about the best I can say.
Are you looking at the Real Clear Politics?
Yes, that's the one that I look at the most near the end, because that takes a lot of emotion out of these polls.
Well, if it goes the way that Real Clear is talking about,
plus 3.
Plus
3 on the Republicans on the Senate. I forget
the
House one.
Right. So it's leaning a little bit harder here.
Well, in a number of Senate races, look at Arizona, where Carrie Lake is up, I think, by double digits for governor. She could have some coattails for Masters in the Senate, the Republican Senate race. So I would watch that. And then in Georgia with Herschel Walker, the Republican candidate, the governor of Georgia, who's going for re-election, is also up near double digits, 8 to 10 percentage points, I believe. So those are important factors. David Wasserman told me early on election night to watch the first district in Indiana, which is typically a Democratic district. If that were to go to the Republicans, that could be a signal of a long night for the Democrats. Wow. Also, in my home state now, Virginia, districts 2 and 7, watch those. If they were to go Republican, signal of a long night for the Democrats. And in Florida, it's not a question of Rubio's going to win by but what margin, David says. If it's 5 points or higher, good night for Republicans.
Wow. Okay. That's very specific races to watch to tell us, to give us an indication. I like it,
because there's so many that you can zero in. And I think the 27th district of California, believe it or not, is another district that the Wall Street Journal said to watch out for. One of my best analysts for the Wall Street Journal is Kimberly Strauss, and she is, if she wasn't married, I'd want to marry her.
Well, now we know. Now we know. So, okay, back to this. This all takes us back to one of the issues that we kind of started with in the conversation today, Jim. And this is from a Wall Street Journal commentary. If Democrats lose next week's election, one reason will be soaring energy prices. Surprise, surprise. There were energy company earnings out last week. There's going to be more out this week. And President Biden is losing his mind over this stuff, Jim.
Yes. Well, and what Wall Street Journal and others have saying, where was Biden's thoughts when the energy companies were losing tens of billions of dollars during the pandemic, when we didn't drive very much, Chip? Yeah. Also, the investment signal from the investment companies telling, and some of these energy activists just a few years ago with Exxon Mobil meeting, Chip, they're saying, why should we give you money to further explore and or drill more when the clear signal from the government is against fossil fuel? So sorry, they're reaping the consequences of failed policy, in my judgment.
Okay, again, just to wrap things up with the conclusion from the Wall Street Journal on this opinion piece, Biden and fellow Democrats simply refuse to understand the economic consequences of their assault on American fossil fuels. They have come to believe that climate is a crisis and that banishing oil and gas is urgent, but that means higher prices, which they now blame on the very companies they want to go out of business. Economic logic won't persuade them, but maybe a route at the ballot box will.
I think that's point on, because
Really good.
that's how you change this town. And it would also mean that Biden would not run for president, because he would get the signal.
21 million Americans have already voted, Jim. What does that mean?
So
Anything?
so much for stopping voters. That was
Right.
charged after the last election, and we've got 2 million almost in Georgia voting again. You've already had 2 million in some other key states, Texas as well. And you're seeing some signals, Chip. I've been in Texas several times recently in the last month, and the southern border, Rio Grande area and things like that, which is usually the Democrats who do vote and win elections, they're turning in those states. So that's another barometer we're going to look on election day. And in Nevada, Biden won Nevada a Hispanic vote by 26 points. The senator who's incumbent is only up by 5 points in the Hispanic vote. Says a lot there.
Yes. Yes, it certainly does. All right, Jim, you travel safe this week, buddy. We'll talk to you again next week as we one day in front of it. Today on AgriTalk, we've got Machinery Pete and U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley. And this afternoon, Sean Hackett Financial Services. Have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.